afternoon and welcome back to My Harlem Portraits, the show that aims at shedding a light on the fundamental contribution of African Americans to the building of this country and on Black excellence. Today, we have the epitome of excellence in the person of Lloyd Williams, who is the president and CEO of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, is a lifetime member of the NAACP and of the National Action Network, and many others of which we will talk about, because otherwise we will stay here all day if I just do the list. So welcome to My Harlem Portraits, Mr. Williams.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you, and thanks for the invitation.
The Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce is celebrating this year its 125th anniversary. It is the second oldest continuous business-civic organization in Manhattan and was originally founded in 1896. This is an incredible record. Tell us about the chamber and what it means and its aims.
Well, anyone calculating 1896 to 2023 will realize it's actually 127 years. Wow. But the reason we are celebrating the 125th anniversary this year is 2 years ago when we had scheduled to celebrate the 125th anniversary in 2021. That was in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And it was the thinking of our board that we should postpone that celebration until it was more timely to do so. So that's why we're doing it this year. But as one can imagine, if one looks at the community of Harlem, defined as in the Greater Harlem communities, include four basic communities. One is East Harlem. Many people know that as El Barrio, but the East Harlem area is one. The other is Central Harlem. Most people, when they think about Harlem, really hone in on Central Harlem because that's where the Apollo Theater is, and that's where 125th Street in the main is, and the Sylvia's restaurants and the studio museums at Harlem, the state office building, etc. But that's Central Harlem. And then there's the Western Harlem area, which again goes from 96th Street up to 145th Street. And in the West Harlem area, it's really where most of our educational institutions are located, be it City College of New York or Columbia University or Barnard College or Union Theological Seminary and Jewish Theological Seminary. Of course, a couple of the most iconic houses of worship in America are located in West Harlem. The Riverside Church, and of course, the iconic Cathedral Church of St. John's the Divine. The Cathedral Church of St. John's the Divine, as you are aware, and many people are not, is the world's largest Gothic cathedral.
Yep.
The world's largest, and it's located on 110th Street to 113th Street. From Amsterdam Avenue over to Morningside Drive. So there's much to deal with. And then we go to what we call the Lower Washington Heights area, which is the fourth community that goes from 168th Street to 145th Street. And all of those three communities that I referenced, including now Central Harlem, so the East Harlem, the West Harlem, the Lower Washington Heights, and now Central Harlem, are all bordered by the Hudson River on the west and the Harlem River on the east. There are some people, of course, who have a tendency to want to define where they're located based on the economics of the time. So those who look at Harlem and wish to see it in a less than positive context, they may live on 103rd Street and Fifth Avenue, and they don't want to identify that they live in Harlem. It's this old adage that says what's in the name, and that's part of what happened. So now people are more now anxious to say that they live in Harlem as the economics goes up, as the demand for housing stock goes up, and as the focus of tourism continues to grow.
And what are the aims of the chamber? The main features that the chamber has been built for?
Well, I think I'm proud of the motto of the chamber. And I think if you look at and listen to the motto of the chamber, it comes to you clearly. And there's an old economic adage that has been on the forefront of business for centuries. And that was the business of business is business. That's all you kept hearing. The business of business is business. So all you had to do is focus on the business components. The motto of our chamber is that the business of business is people. And why that is important is because it allows our chamber to focus on health issues, on education issues, on issues related to senior citizens, on issues related to our children, issues related to housing, issues related to arts and culture and entertainment. We believe that the purpose of the Greater Harlem Chambers of Commerce is focused on the business of the people, whether they are business owners, whether they are customers, whether they're residents, whether they're employees, whether they're professionals, etc. We focus on the business of people.
And you are doing an amazing job in that, because all the events that you organize are always very people focused, and they are focused on elevating people and giving them more knowledge and opening their minds. So that's what I really love about all the work we do together with Bosa River most of the time. So thank you again for all your work.
Thank you.
There are some heroes of the Chambers of Commerce that you wanted to talk about, and I'm very glad you want to talk about them. Hope Stevens and Percy Sutton. I actually interviewed her yesterday, Keisha Sutton James. So it's back to back. It's a full circle today with this interview. Tell us about these two amazing and iconic figures.
Well, Hope R. Stevens was the first Black president of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, which was then known as the Uptown Chamber of Commerce. Hope Stevens came over to America for the island nation of St. Kitts Nevis. He was born on the island of Nevis. He came here at the age of 19 years of age, and he then went to college here. By the time Hope Stevens transitioned, Hope Stevens spoke 19 languages fluently. Wow. 19 languages fluently. In addition to that, being known as one of the great counselors and one of the great attorneys in the world, he created the Constitution for the government of Kenya. He created a constitution for the nation of the Bahamas. He also created the National Conference of Black Lawyers. He was one of the founders of Carver Federal Savings Bank, etc. Hope Stevens, we could go on and on. And when he passed away, he was an officer of the British Empire. And the office of the British Empire is one level below knighthood, being a knight of the British Empire. And in fact, he was scheduled to be knighted by the Queen of England. And unfortunately, 3 weeks before that occasion, he passed away. So Hope was just incredible. I would travel with Hope as a young puppy, and wherever we went around the world, he was greeted as if he was the royalty by whatever nation we went to, whether it was Japan or Nigeria, or whether it was Ghana or Jamaica or Cuba, etc. When we speak about Percy Sutton, it's hard to know where you begin and how you end. One of the most premier politicians in the history of America. Many people do not know that Percy Sutton was the person who created the Congressional Black Caucus. Percy served as an assembly member, New York State Assembly member, as the president of the Borough of Manhattan. He also founded Inner City Broadcasting Corporation, which many know as WBLS-FM and WLIB-AM. He also was singularly responsible for the reopening of the Apollo Theater, which had been closed for many, many years. And Percy refurbished the Apollo Theater. But most importantly, he was known as one of the most brilliant strategists and business person you could ever meet. And so my life has been blessed with the chamber, with those two persons. I was tabbed by Percy Sutton to succeed him as the head of the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce. It was, in fact, Percy Sutton who changed the name with the board from what was then the Uptown Chamber of Commerce to the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce, because he wanted to make sure we were dealing with the four areas that I referenced, the East Harlem and Central Harlem and West Harlem and Lower Washington Heights, as a Greater Harlem Chamber. So we can go on and on about Percy Sutton. I cannot tell you, I traveled around the world with Percy. We went to Brazil, we went to Japan. I remember most importantly, one time we took a trip to Cuba and had a overnight audience with then Premier Fidel Castro.
Wow.
Anyone, you name Harry Belafonte or Martin Luther King or Ozzie Davis, whoever you might know that are iconic in their fields, they know the name Percy Sutton. So I'm just honored that he was my mentor.
You had two amazing mentors, I would say. He couldn't have been mentor, but
I was fortunate, but the other part of the equation, which seems almost surreal, is that my godfather was Malcolm X.
Wow. He was my hero. Malcolm X was my hero. My God.
Malcolm X, when I was a child, I lived at 120th Street, then between Lenox and 7th Avenue. The Shabazz temple was 4 blocks away on 116th Street. I'll make it a short story. Somehow I met Malcolm X as a little child. I was sitting on my stoop. I was reading this book on a summer day, and somehow I became aware of her presence. And I looked up, and it was this gentleman, I had no idea who he was, and he asked me what was I reading, and I spoke to him. I told him we had a great conversation, as you did in those days, children respecting the adults. And then about a year later, it seemed almost to the day, I was on that stoop reading another book, and he appeared again. Long story short, he told me to come visit him at the mosque when I wanted to, and always let people know, wherever the security might be, that I am his godson.
Wow.
And so, long story short, I took that under advisement. I really didn't understand any of the importance of this until a few years later, when I was in junior high school. There was a class on social civics, and they brought up the name of Malcolm X. And I said to my classmates, "Oh, I know him." And they did not believe I knew him. And my school, Wadley Junior High School, was only about 3 blocks away from the mosque. And I went there, and short story, after a while, the security came out to get me and said, "The minister will see you." And I went in to see him. And from that point in time, we've had this bond. And part of the bond was that more often than not, when he was in New York City on Saturday morning, I would meet him. And what I would do is I would meet him at the Salam number 7 restaurant there, and have breakfast with him. But there was always a group of people, small group of people that was there. I would meet him there, or he would pick me up and he would take me to a breakfast meeting with him. And the breakfast meeting was never an awful lot of people, maybe 6, maybe 8, around that. Those breakfast meetings were with the clergy, were with the politicians, were with the number runners, was with the underground, was with the mafia, different types of meetings that he would have. And they would oftentimes engage in some very spirited discussions, never rude, but sometimes spirited. And inevitably, in the middle of the conversation, one of the persons would turn and say, "Who's the kid sitting over there?" And Malcolm would look at them and say, "Don't worry about it, that's my godson." And then they would re-engage in the conversation. And what would happen after that is when the meeting was over, Malcolm would always debrief me. And he would ask me, "What did you learn from that?" And one of the things that I learned most from that exercise, that I seek to convey to people, especially young people, the message I learned from those exercises is that it is far more important to be wrong than to be right. And people would say, "Well, what do you mean by why is it more important to be wrong?" Well, what I learned from that is that if you are wrong and your mind is open, you can now learn how to be right. You can learn if you're wrong. Oftentimes people get uptight about being wrong and they block out the true message of how to become right. Oftentimes, what I also learned is oftentimes if you are right, you're just right. You don't learn that much because you are already right. So I say that to people, never hesitate to be wrong, because being wrong is an educational and a learning process. And that's part of what I learned from my godfather. And there are mega stories. Sometimes I cannot believe how God has blessed me. In life, I had a tutor when I was a child, at St. Martin's Church at 122nd Street, now Malcolm X Boulevard, then Lenox Avenue. And I had this tutor because my grandmother told me she wanted me to be tutored, and in those days, and hopefully today too, whatever grandma tells you, you do.
Yeah.
But Mr. Hughes was my tutor, and I learned a lot from him. And it was only a few years later, when I was in junior high school, that I understood that Mr. Hughes was Langston Hughes.
Oh
To me,
oh my God.
well, to me, he was just Mr. Hughes. Now, that's part of the magic of Harlem, that you can say Hope Stevens, and you can say Percy Sutton, you could say Malcolm X, and you could say Constance Baker Motley, and you could say Joe Louis, and you could say Sugar Ray Robinson. You can say all of those names because you walk past them in the street. And when I was coming out, to walk down 125th Street, you could not walk a couple of blocks without passing royalty, because that's what the community was. And they were just walking down the street. And it might be Ruby Dee that's just walking down the street, or Dizzy Gillespie that's walking down the street, or a Marlon Brando who is just walking down the street, or Ozzie Davis. And you walk past these people. Jackie Robinson, I remember Jackie Robinson because above and beyond being the great baseball player, Jackie Robinson was the president of Freedom National Bank. And he would walk down that street each and every day. So it's the magic of Harlem, as Langston Hughes said, as goes Harlem, so goes Black America. But when he said that, there was no separation between the Hispanic and the Caribbean and the African American. We were all a part of the diaspora. So we were talking about Black America when he was talking about that. He understood that Harlem was home for Tito Puente, and Harlem was home for Celia Cruz. He understood that Harlem was home for Hewlin Jack and Constance Baker Motley, who were Caribbean, that Harlem was the home for Marcus Garvey, and who, again, we understand that above and beyond what is called the African American. For example, most people will look at me and they will think that I'm an African American, but I'm not. My mother is Cuban, or was Cuban. My father was Jamaican. But when people see me, they don't understand the combination of the cultures that are in front. So when you walk down the street in Harlem or Bed-Stuy or the South Bronx or South Jamaica, you walk past people of color, but many of them are just international, whether they're from the Dominican Republic, or whether Sierra Leone, whether they're from Jamaica, whether they're from Alabama, whether they're from Mississippi, on and on and on. So I, for example, I have family in Brazil. I have family in England. I have family in Cuba. I have family in Jamaica, plus different sections of the United States. So we cannot take each other for granted. We all have something else to bring to the table, and we need to share our history. We need to share our communication. The major problem with people of color in America is we have been programmed not to talk to each other, not to communicate with each other, not to trust each other. And we have been programmed by the 3 and 4 locks on our door and all of those things. When we look at our community, we look at drugs, but we understand that drugs does not come from our community, it comes into our community. Where is it coming from? Where are these guns coming from? what's going on with these things, etc. So we need to understand how we are being programmed aggressively to not know each other, like each other, trust each other, but most importantly, not to communicate with each other. As a result of that, we find ourselves in the state that we're in. But let's go to the other side. Let's go to the great side of this. The magnificence of how we somehow weathered the storm. The magnificence of how we have not been overly bitter and vengeful says that our time is here, our time is coming, and all we need to do is continue to communicate.
Absolutely. I mean, this is wonderful. And I cannot believe we are already at the end of our conversation, and we haven't touched many of the subjects I wanted to talk to you about. So what do you think because I wanted to talk about Harlem Week, because it's coming in August. So what do you think if we do another interview in about a month and a half, towards the end of May, about in specific Harlem Week and all the other events that you have? Would you like to do that?
Maria, let me say to you this. You and I run into each other periodically. I am not one, excusing my vulgarity, I'm not one who BS people. The bottom line is I have great respect for you, great regard for you and what you're doing. Anything that I or we can do to help you on that mission, you can count on us, whether it's re-interviewing me or bringing others to the table. Most importantly, whatever we can do, you can count on us doing it. And just know that there's that profound respect for and appreciation of who you are, with your elegance and who you are with being involved and available and participating in things around the city and beyond. So whatever I can do to work with you, count that as a done deal.
You are nearly bringing tears to my eyes when you say this, because coming from you, this is really special. And I have to tell you one thing before they cut us off, that the reason why I'm doing this is the same reason you were talking about before, that Harlem is a community that has embraced me, that makes me feel at home. I actually feel more at home here in Harlem than I feel at home in Italy. This is my family. And it's a family that has so much to give and so much which has been taken from, that I was looking for a way to give back, and I think this is my way to give back, because I have to.
God has a plan, and the bottom line is count on us and count on me in any way we can help.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this conversation. And we definitely talk again about Harlem Week and all the other incredible things in the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce does.
Let me just end by saying this, so this will be a prelude to when we get to Harlem Week. Each year, Harlem Week has a theme.
Yes.
Some of them have resonated around the world. I'm particularly proud of our theme this year. And our theme is Be the Change.
Oh, yes.
Be the change. Hope, joy, and love. My point is, we can talk about what needs to be done. We can point fingers at who isn't doing what. But we have the ability to be the change. And if we can be the change in our home, if we can be the change on our block, if we can be the change in our neighborhood, we must be the change. So I look forward to sharing more about Harlem Week and its mission when we next speak to each other.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again for this conversation. Was given me so much emotionally, and also so much knowledge, so many things I didn't know you've been telling me. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our viewers. See you next Saturday, 12:30 on Spectrum News, on Spectrum, channel 1993. Bye-bye from my heart. Thank you.